Friends, welcome again to Church Online. Let's acknowledge the country on which we meet. We acknowledge the Bidjigal people of the Darug Nation, who are the traditional custodians of this land, and we pay respects to elders past, present and emerging, and to any First Nations folk who may be sharing with us in Church Online today. I welcome you all to this service of worship, and may the Spirit of Christ be with you all.
Good morning once again and welcome to Online Church. As you can see, this morning we're set up for communion that we weren't able to have last week. So if you want to pause this for a moment and go and grab some wine and some bread, we'll be using that a little later in our service. Some of you will remember that we had a virtual morning tea a couple of weeks ago. You'll remember it because you're still having a bit of a giggle about it. Well, we're going to try that again next week. So straight after the service at 10:30 a.m, you will connect as you normally do with Zoom, and we'll all be there. We will send out a link to that in an email this week. If you're not on that email, send an email to the link across the bottom of the screen here, and we'll send you the details so you can connect to Zoom. This week we've got the usual suspects of kids' play videos going out on Wednesday and our Zoom Bible study on Thursday at 7:30 p.m. This week we're looking at Genesis 18 and the story of Sarah hearing some extraordinary news, and her response is that she laughs. We're going to begin our investigation of Genesis 18 by Sandra from the evening service reading us a poem.
Then came Sarah's turn. God's angels visited her at her tent. Good news they bore, for she who never had a baby born, the angel said to Abraham, her husband, "Your wife shall bear thee a son." Ha, ha, ha! Sarah laughed for disbelief when it should have been for relief. But that didn't stop the Lord from accomplishing what was her lot, one that was adjudged barren, one that age had disqualified and menopause had written off. Would she have a baby? How possible? Impossible. Well, impossible, so it always seems, until God comes into the scene. Sarah conceived and gave birth just as the Lord had said. Oh, barrenness, where is thy girth? Menopause, where is thy pause? How dare you pause God's cause? She who God has remembered, age remaineth only just a number. And Sarah laughed again, not for disbelief, but for relief.
Today's reading comes from Genesis 18, verses 1 to 15. The Lord appeared to Abraham near the great trees of Mamre while he was sitting at the entrance to his tent in the heat of the day. Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, "If I have found favor in your eyes, my lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree. Let me get you something to eat, so you can be refreshed, and then go on your way, now that you have come to your servant." "Very well," they answered. "Do as you say." So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah. "Quick," he said, "get 3 shahs of the finest flour and knead it and bake some bread." Then he ran to the herd and selected a choice, tender calf and gave it to a servant who hurried to prepare it. He then brought some curds and milk and the calf that had been prepared and set these before them. While they ate, he stood near them under the tree. "Where is your wife Sarah?" they asked him. "There, in the tent," he said. Then one of them said, "I will surely return to you about this time next year, and Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Now Sarah was listening at the entrance to the tent, which was behind him. Abraham and Sarah were already very old, and Sarah was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed, thinking, "After I am worn out and my Lord is old, will I now have this pleasure?" Then the Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Will I really have a child, now that I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? I will return to you at the appointed time next year, and Sarah will have a son." Sarah was afraid, so she lied and said, "I did not laugh." But he said, "Yes, you did laugh."
Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? When George Floyd was held down on the ground with the knee of a Minneapolis police officer planted firmly on his neck, he cried out to his mother. It's a disturbing memory. As he was dying, he called out to the one who had given him birth and nurtured him. Such a mix-up of life and death. It's unsettling. Yet George Floyd's untimely death gave birth to something new. A mass movement of protests in America demanding justice and change, the biggest since the civil rights movement in the 1960s. It seems to have the potential to force lasting change. The mix-up of life and death continues to unfold. And here in Australia, that call for justice has resonated. 437 Indigenous Australians have died in custody, even though there was a Royal Commission in 1991 that sought to report on this and rectify it. Most of its recommendations still lie on the shelf, and no police or prison officers have been convicted. The critical issue here actually is not retributive justice, punishing offenders. That is important. But what's more important is a change of culture. Everyone, regardless of skin colour, treated with respect. But after 437 deaths, will this ever happen? Will we see Indigenous Australians and Afro-Americans treated with the same respect accorded to others? Is anything too wonderful for the Lord? I find myself hopeful, but aware that a dose of resignation lurks in the background. Martin Luther King famously said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice." Yes, there have been significant advances over the last 120 years. Nonetheless, the 20th century was the most violent and bloody in human history. So our text for this morning from Genesis 18 holds up high an intoxicating question. Will these things ever change? Let's interrogate the text with that question and then look at what that might mean for the life of faith. Looking at the text. The story is full of detail and interest. It draws you in. Abraham, sitting at the entrance to his tent, is surprised by the visit of some strangers. Now, was it one stranger or three? This teasing detail is not resolved in this story. Abraham offers them hospitality. Custom and culture dictated this. It was a moral obligation in the ancient world. And Abraham, as head of the house, was in charge of proceedings. Sarah, quickly, make some cakes for our visitors. Abraham expected that his guests would accept the hospitality offered and then leave. Let me bring you some bread, and after that you may pass on. We can sensibly read this comment as an expectation on Abraham's part that his world would quickly return to normal after this unexpected interruption. However, halfway through this story, the visitors displace Abraham as the person in charge. They lead the narrative in an unexpected direction, announcing something extraordinary beyond belief. Sarah will have a child. Sarah, listening in behind the tent flap, laughed. She was 90. Ha! Have a child? Impossible! Ironically, the child she eventually gave birth to was named Isaac, which means he laughed. What does this text say to us today in our life of faith? It calls into question conventional notions of hope. Mostly, what we hope for is the continuation and development of what we know. We don't laugh with incredulity about what we hope for. We expect it to happen. We want our children and grandchildren to grow up safe, fulfilled and happy. Since my granddaughter Charlie was born, I've been absolutely drawn into that. Already, I muse and wonder, how will her life unfold? But who hopes that a parent or a friend in their 90s will have a baby? Genesis 18 is an arresting story that teases us. And there's an invitation there. Dwell inside the story. Get a sense of the way it pushes to the very edge of what is known and then says, jump right in. Most of life works relatively well because we know what to expect. When I hop on my beloved push bike, I don't have to think about how to ride it. I know how to ride it. It happens. I hope I will have an enjoyable ride, and generally I do. It's a delight. Just occasionally, I go to do something I know how to do, but it doesn't happen. That's probably a sign that I'm getting older. But it's also a delicious moment, a not knowing moment, and it's a time to laugh. It could be the presence of the divine. Most people in church think of God as a comfort, an explanation of why things happen. This text counsels otherwise. God does not guarantee the way things are. In fact, God upsets what is stable and predictable. God is a visitor who drops in, but then suddenly takes charge and says, something new's about to happen. And we think, hang on, that wasn't in the script. Well, that's the way that gospel hope emerges. By upsetting what we know, by making us laugh with incredulity. No, that's impossible. That won't happen. faith grasps that interruption, welcomes it, and joins in. Walter Brueggemann, a well-known biblical scholar, suggests that many regard faith in the opposite way, that it's helpful and reasonable. No, he says, faith is unreasonable, scandalous. It breaks open our customary frames of reference. Ironically then, conventional notions of faith may undermine the very gospel we seek to promote. Faith may mean falling off my bike, laughing, and then ensuring I don't quickly hop back on. It's a new moment. Justice for Afro-Americans and Indigenous Australians is precisely not about getting back onto the bike. Rather, it's about those in charge falling off their bike, allowing that calamity to inform and create a different set of actions, intentions, policies, programs. It's about allowing something new to come into the world and welcoming it. Let's try and draw this together. Does the arc of the moral universe bend towards justice? I'm still not sure. It's a huge claim, and our story doesn't answer that question. It's a particular story, and that's what we're called to do. To be very specific, particular, local. So when you next fall off your bike or welcome unannounced visitors, laugh. Be aware it could be the presence of God. And then dare to say, thanks be to God. Amen. Some questions about our text to reflect on. What do you think? Does the arc, the moral arc of the universe, bend towards justice? And secondly, more specifically and personally, when was the last time that you laughed with incredulity?
Today we give thanks for life in all its abundance, for health, for strength, for sound minds and strong hearts, for the ability to love, and for people around us whom we can love. We hear the birds. We smell freshly cut grass and gardens of flowers. We touch friends and family. We see the wonder of creation. And for all this, we give thanks. We see in the life of Jesus a passion for others, a passion to see people freed from oppression, freed from poverty, freed from sickness and disease, freed from loneliness, freed to be all they were created to be, children of the light. And we see in this passion of Jesus a guiding principle for our own lives. to live passionately for others. For we know that in living passionately for others, we bring meaning and passion to our own lives. Amen.
Ian has joined me at the table for our celebration of communion. And we're going to begin communion this Sunday by passing the peace. Now, of course, we can't do it the way we would normally do it. So Ian and I are going to do an elbow bump. And for you at home, if there's someone there with you, I invite you to share the peace with them in whatever way is appropriate. So may the peace of the Lord be always with you. Peace be with you, Ian.
And also with you.
Thank you. As we come to the great prayer of thanksgiving, we will give thanks for those things that are new and unexpected. And during the course of this prayer, I'll pause for a moment. You might like to think about something new or unexpected in your life. Let's pray. Loving God, we give thanks for those things that come to us as a surprise, that have done throughout history. The creation that emerged from chaos. People who rose up from nowhere, unencumbered by convention, and spoke about justice, love, and faith. Jesus, who would have thought he would emerge from the oblivion of death, and that the haunting message of his kingdom would continue to entice us? Let's take a moment to reflect on things that have surprised us. For all of these things we say, thanks be to God. Amen. Let's now remember how this sacrament began. The disciples sat down with Jesus to mark Passover. They imagined it would be the conventional story, the Exodus story. But Jesus changed it. He took bread, he broke it. He said to them, "This symbolises a new future. The old, that's broken. The future, it's coming." Then he took the cup. "Take this, drink from it. It will give you courage on the way. Dare to dream of this new future." So now I invite you to take the elements, bread and wine if you have them, and to partake, and if you don't, just to share in this moment. Ian, the bread of a new future.
Michael, the bread of a new future.
And we take the cup and pour it out. Ian, the cup of courage.
Michael, the cup of courage.
And now for the benediction. Friends, go into the future with hope. Look for what is unusual. When you see it, laugh and join in. Amen.